The skyline of Tampa, Florida is ominously clear this Tuesday morning, and today we will be making history. Welcome back to the Sunshine State Rails. It was big news on this week in late February that CSX's executive office car train will be making a return to the Central Florida system. But there was just one off plan on that train's itinerary that would make this day go down in the books. Such would bring us out to CSX's Yeoman Yard on Tuesday morning, February 22nd, where, sitting beneath Orient Road, remote switcher crews are working, weed sprayer trucks are out for the yard, and an ethanol train ready to head north gets their crew. With the exception of the weed sprayer truck, this is a fairly typical weekday morning here at Yeoman, switching operations and the occasional road train getting their crew to head north. As a fresh crew boards an empty ethanol unit train, that would be our first action of this morning.
Got the engine 7257 in the lead and a 3279 right behind it. Both of them are 4,200 gallons of fuel. We got 96 cars, 2 loads, 94 engines, a ton of 42 seats, 8 lane, 5784, not a key train, no work. We got PCC and trip off. Counting today performed over. Y'all ready to go right now there? Ready to go, boss.
The unit train of this morning would be a B642, empty ethanol tank cars from here at Yeoman back to the Proviso, Illinois interchange to the Union Pacific Railroad. And as the final car of the train exits the yard, we can still see the switcher crews hard at work building consists for local trains and road trains alike that depart this yard every day. Now, obviously, the center of this video is the CSX Executive Office Car train. But where is it? We're at Yeoman, but it's not here. After the special train had made its journey from Jacksonville to here at Tampa yesterday, they spun the train around so that it would face eastward down here under the overpass at Orient. And this morning around 7 o'clock a.m., they left Yeoman in the same fashion that B642 is now. The difference being that when the office car train made it 10 miles west to Valrico, they would turn south into the Bone Valley. That being the major areas of Hillsborough, Polk, and Hardee counties that see the majority of phosphate mining and commercial phosphate shipping. The CSX company executives who are aboard this train would tour the Bone Valley for the majority of this morning before returning to Tampa later. And that is what we are here in Tampa waiting for. After sitting under the Orient Road for a while though, we'd move east across the Tampa Bypass Canal to 78th Street, and we would immediately be surprised with some Canadian Pacific locomotives. Some interesting Canadian engines pulling an even more interesting train of potash hoppers. Some of you on my channel may recall my canned potash video from a couple years ago. This video documented a test train of potash from the Canadian Pacific down to Rockport Yard in Tampa. They ran that test train a couple years ago and then never ran one again, until about a week before this video. With the contract and new equipment of whoever is shipping this potash now in place at Rockport, after 2 years of absence, the next potash train to Rockport arrived here 6 days before this video was shot. And within that 6 days, the train had been unloaded and is now coming out of Rockport headed back north for Canada. From what we know, this potash service to Rockport is now in full swing, and I hope then to see one of these loaded trains fairly soon in the future. As the potash train clears though, we can see that some maintenance vehicles have shown up to 78th Street. They'd shortly get onto the same track that the potash train has just ran on to inspect the entirety of the AZA line. Whenever this corporate train comes to town, there's always a manic battle amongst road foremen, track inspectors, and maintenance crews alike to make sure that all tracks it'll be on are in tip-top shape for their executive partners on the way down. It's almost humorous to see the amount of effort that's put in for these guys that show up. But alas, it must be done, and nobody can deny that at least in the corporate eyes, these are important people. It is also a commonly known fact on CSX that so long as they can help it, they do not stop this train for anything. All area trains are notified of this one's presence to make sure that they can do anything and everything to be out of its way when it gets here, even if that means skipping customer services or delaying late trains.
Okay, because by the time 700 gets by you, there's going to be no time for any funny business over there because we got a P001 coming. Supposed to be at Valrico around 2 o'clock there.
Turns out they would not be at Valrico around 2 o'clock. They would actually be at Valrico around, well, I don't know what time, but they were here at Tampa at 1:55 p.m. P00121, CSX's Executive Office Car Special, would split the signals up at YN and diverge onto the Yeoman Bypass track. By taking this, they would totally bypass all of the Yeoman yard tracks, stopping at the yard office for a crew change. And a very quick one at that. These executives don't stay stopped anywhere for long.
CSX number 1, stay upon. Release your authority on traction on South Oak Yard limit to stay south into Valrico. Patrick Jackson will answer, over. P00121 over. P00121, go ahead, over. Yes, sir, good afternoon, CM Terrazoli, the ACA 879.3 with the CSX 0001, ready to take it to Bradenton, over.
They would be changing crews and taking the Yeoman Bypass track to bypass the yard and turn south for Bradenton.
Alright, EC1 number 80212, today is day 2/22/23. Go ahead, the AZA 879.3. P00121 engine CSXT number 1, Pierazzoli, circle on way, operate main track, both directions. Between the NASC stamp on the main and the AZA 916.8 on the main, over.
CSX's corporate office car train was about to make a trip to the very bottom of the system in West Florida. And here at TS Crossing, the beginning of the Tampa terminal and what will eventually lead to the Palmetto subdivision, the AZA line would mark the beginning of this historic bound.
P00121, CSX 1, clear, TS, southbound.
One thing that we knew would be frustrating, but we knew we were getting into when we decided to chase the office car train, was that Tampa's afternoon traffic on a Wednesday would be absolutely horrific. And the office car train with a higher speed limit than freight trains and with no stops to make until Bradenton would be quite a pain to chase in and of itself. Add traffic to that and you've got a disaster waiting to happen. Ultimately, we'd make it though, and due to some circuitry issues on the Alafaya River Swing Bridge, we'd be able to beat them to one of my other favorite spots in downtown Gibsonton. There's just something about this region between Pennsylvania Avenue and Gibsonton Drive that has always attracted me. The manicured grass with the parallel streets and the First Baptist Church with the miscellaneous trees make for a great scene as trains roll through. But after all the trains that I've shot here over the years, I would have never considered that CSX's corporate office car train could be one of the future contenders. But the afternoon of February 22nd, 2023 would change all of that.
P001, that was a good roll by. Looks good from the left. Markers in place, clear to bridge. Alpha over out. Alright, good. We appreciate the inspection there. Alabama River, PO01, 21 out.
Rolling into Apollo Beach, we would continue to battle Tampa Bay's afternoon traffic as we roll south towards Manatee County, finally catching back up with them as we come into Ruskin and cross the Little Manatee River.
Kilo 01, CSX 1, approach Little Manatee River Bridge south.
Those of you who have watched my videos for some time will likely recognize this location, the curve at Port Manatee, after I've used this location time and time again to set up for Tropicana juice trains and other movements on the Palmetto sub. That said, I think that really defines what makes this office car train's trip to Bradenton this afternoon so special to me, considering that in my early years I had become accustomed to seeing almost nothing but Tropicana consists on these tracks. And so, to me, the Palmetto subdivision was always symbolic of the Tropicana juice train and not much else. And so, from the beginning, the idea of seeing these kinds of uncommon movements on this subdivision and in those scenes that I started with seemed to always be something that I had indirectly sought after. And now, in 2023, I'd be seeing CSX's most pristine and high-priority train right here on this curve at Port Manatee. Speaking with the scenes I started with, southwards we'd continue down to the spot that everyone should know is coming. Down US 41 into the outskirts of Palmetto, crossing the Palmetto sub one more time, almost neck and neck with the train before rolling into downtown Palmetto and across the Big Manatee River. P001's crew has already called ahead to the Alafia River Bridge tender to get the Big Manatee drawbridge down and locked so they can cross into downtown Bradenton. And so, everybody should know that even though it would be on the alternate side due to the sun's position now in this afternoon light, the Manatee Riverwalk is where we would go to see P001, the office car train, cross the Big Manatee River span into Bradenton. Ultimately, it would be this crossing of the Big Manatee River into Bradenton that would mark history, as I believe that this is the very first time in history that CSX's office car train has reached Bradenton, Florida. Perhaps I'm wrong about this, but I've yet to see any other reports from the past of this train having made it here before. And although the Palmetto subdivision has seen the sparse passenger movements such as the occasional geometry train and circus trains up until 2017, revenue passenger trains haven't ran through Bradenton since April 30th, 1971. That would have been the day before Amtrak took over the major passenger rail operations in the United States on May 1st of that year. And with Amtrak taking over the passenger operations on the Palmetto subdivision from the current Seaboard coastline, they would discontinue all passenger trains south of Tampa. Though it's hard to say in this scenario whether this passenger train will generate revenue for CSX, as the executives who are aboard this train simply use it to tour different parts of the system. So frankly, this is CSX's private jet on rails, as I see it. Though, as it is likely a historical feat to see this train in downtown Bradenton, it may not all come with benefits, as the arrival in this train in different parts of the country isn't always looked upon favorably, as usually when these executives tour different parts of the system, they're looking for things that they can get rid of and or save money with. And so that sometimes means unfavorable changes after one of this train's visits. It also then begs the question, why did they choose to come to Bradenton? Because if they've never come here before, why now? Perhaps it was just their time to come and tour Bradenton, though there's even some speculation that the Norfolk Southern derailment up in East Palestine, Ohio had something to do with this visit, though that's all speculation and there's no way to say for sure. Though after we saw the office car train cross the giant river span into downtown Bradenton, we get to fight this kind of traffic to get over to the US 41 and 301 crossing to intercept the train again. And there was no traffic accident or train stuck across the tracks. This was simply downtown Bradenton traffic at 3:30 p.m. But finally arriving at the US 301 and 41 crossing, it would showcase one of the unique aspects of railroading in Bradenton and give us a shot at seeing something you almost never do with this office car train. You see, in Bradenton, there are no Ys or loop tracks to totally spin a train the other direction. But Bradenton would be the end of the line for the office car trains, so they'd have to turn around and go back to Tampa. But without any Ys or balloon tracks to simply spin the entire train around, they would have to run the engines around the train, which simply requires decoupling the locomotives from one end and then running them around on this alternate track to the other end of the train so they can pull it the other way. But they almost never do this with the office car train, as the observation car, which the executives use to observe the system as they roll over it, is on the end of the train. But by running the former Amtrak F40 locomotives to the other end of the train, it would put the observation car right behind the locomotives, and the alternate CSX number 2 would be leading back to Tampa. And so for this train's journey from Bradenton back north to Tampa, they'd essentially be pulling it in reverse, something rarely ever seen with this office car train consist.
Big man, please line light ready for you to proceed upon signal, over. Line light ready for you to proceed, don't signal. More. Anywhere in there is good. One big one there, couple up.
Well, how traffic is
5 and good. Press it out there, number 2. Press it out.
So much of a tour for Bradenton these guys would get. They don't stick around these places for very long. Once the engines were on the north side of the train, they'd only sit around for about 10 more minutes before taking back off for Tampa. And we knew that they were about to do that, and we also knew that with this piling up on US 301 and 41, that we did not want to risk getting stuck in this afterward and never seeing the train again. So we'd have to leave ahead of the train to have that chance of seeing them again, such which I would appreciate given the opportunity. So, heading back north across the river, we'd set up just outside of Palmetto, pulling off to the side of Bayshore Road just before the US 41 overpass just north of the 25th Street crossing. Here, the fairly manicured grass along with the solo palm tree and Manatee County Water Tower makes for one of my other favorite scenes along the Palmetto subdivision. So it was back north on US 41, passing all the construction that's happening outside of Bradenton that I have never really been fond of. Those old scenes that I reference on the Palmetto sub are almost exclusive to the tracks now, as off US 41 there is always some new subdivision or neighborhood being built. At least the drive down the Palmetto subdivision looks nothing the way it did when I first started shooting trains here. But I'm still following trains on it, and the office car train would turn out to be one of those trains. So we'd stop off for them again just north of the Port Manatee Yard at County Line Road. And even the headlight arrangement on the former Amtrak locomotives is unique to them, and a set that I never thought that I would see at this location. But perhaps our numerous jokes in my early days of this train someday coming to this line perhaps spoke this day into existence. But I couldn't deny that as the train rolled up on me at 40 miles an hour that this was all very real. From there, it would be back north across the Little Manatee River, coming into Ruskin one last time for our final shot. I'd utilize one of the more hidden spots that I was familiar with to see P001 one last time on the Palmetto subdivision. So that would do it. Being pulled oddly enough in reverse, the office car train was on its way back to Tampa. Once they arrived back there, the executives would get off the train, spending the night in a Tampa Bay hotel, before getting back on their private train the next morning and heading back to Jacksonville. But for whatever reason may have prompted this, February 2023 would see the office car train reach Bradenton, Florida, and thereby the executives to the very bottom of the system, at least in West Florida. I am quite grateful that I've been able to document this historic trip down the Palmetto subdivision, and that y'all were able to join me for this one, at least from the means of this video. That said, in Ruskin, Florida, on CSX's Palmetto subdivision, this is Kotabeaner, and I will see you next time on the Sunshine State Rails.